So we are continuing. We're going to start off with the Sefer Mitzvos, the Klal Hasheni or the Shoresh Hasheni, because that's what the English chapter is going to focus on. And I figure we should read the Hebrew before we do the English. Okay, so this is, again, context here. Our overarching question is, what is the nature of derived according to the Rambam? And we are using Moshe Halbertal's book, Maimonides, Life and Thought as our guide, but we're going to look at all the sources inside, or we're going to try to. Okay, so we are on, you see we are on the packet on page, what page number is it? Page Yud Beis Klal Hasheni. So this is in the Rambam's rules for what you count as a mitzvah. Klal Hasheni, the second rule, Shelo kol ma shenilmad be'achas mishlosh esrei Middos she'ator Nidreshes behen o beriboy roy limnoso. So not everything, this is a funny way he states this, okay? Not everything that's learned out from one of the 13 hermeneutic principles through which the Torah is expounded, or through a riboy, is it proper to count as a mitzvah? Okay, meaning some of the things that you learn out from them, you do count as a mitzvah, but not all of them, okay? And yeah, okay, fine. And we're not gonna go through what all the 13 middos are. And you know, it's funny how riboy is not called one of the middos, I guess. You know, you would think it might be, but I don't know. Okay, so we've already said in the introduction of our composition on the commentary on the Mishnah, okay, so again, first work that the Rambam wrote, first major work was the introduction to the Mishnah, and I do plan on looking at some of the sources that's in that Hebrew packet there. So he says, we explained that the majority of the laws of Torah are learned out through the 13 middos, yeah?
I realize I should probably know this, but my asking shows me not paying attention at all during davening, but it's a
what are they?
And I realize asking shows me not paying attention during davening.
What's the question? I missed the question.
Basically, what's the list?
Oh, what is the list?
And I know that
I don't say it, but so I don't know about Pat. We'll just read it. Just I don't want to spend time on it because
sorry.
No, because we go on forever. But it is good to have the list just so we know what we're talking about.
I guess sorry about that.
That's okay. All right. So the question is, what are the shlosh middos she'ator Nidreshes behen? So if you look on page 50, 40, 48 and 49, right? So they are, and I'm going to just read the R scroll here because I don't even know all of them. Okay. I wouldn't even be able to translate all of them. So the first two are the ones that are most familiar to us. Okay. So he says, Rabbi Yishmael Omer at the bottom, through 13 rules is the Torah elucidated. Mikal v'chomer, so that's an a fortiori argument, right? That's from lenient to strict. That one we know. Umi gezerah shava. And from our school translates it as through tradition that similar words in different contexts are meant to clarify one another. If you want a catchy way to say that in English, it's a lexical analogy. Lexical meaning like textual and or linguistic, and then analogy being comparison. Mi binyan av mikasav echad, umi binyan av mishnei ksuvim. I guess that both counts as one. Through a general principle derived from one verse and a general principle derived from two verses. 4, miklal uprat, through a general statement limited by a specification. 5, umiprat uchlal, through a specification broadened by a general statement. And by the way, if you want examples of these, the R-score footnote brings down usually one or two examples of each of them. So like this one I happen to know, through a specification broadened by a general statement. Let's see if they say this. No. So I assume this is like, I don't know. Hold on. Okay, no, this is a good example that they bring. So you look at number 5 in the footnote. Product law. This is the reverse of the above case. In describing the obligation to return lost objects, the Torah says that one should return his donkey, ... his garment, ... any lost object. The concluding generality teaches that there are no exceptions to this rule, right? So these are examples, but we're not going to go through all of them. 6, miklal shehut tzarich leprat and miprat shehut tzarich lechlal, through a general statement followed by a specification, followed in turn by another general statement. Okay, yeah, it says you may infer you can tell these article ones are not translations, they're like explanations. You may only infer whatever is similar to the specification. 7, mikla shu tzarich leprat, miprat shu tzarich leklal. When a general statement requires a specification or specification requires a general statement to clarify its meaning. 8, kol davar shaya bichlal v'yatza min haklal lo lamed al atzmo yatza el lamed al haklal kulo yatza. Anything that was included in a general statement but was then singled out from the general statement in order to teach something was not singled out to teach only about itself, but to apply its teaching to the entire generality. 9, kol davar shahaya bichlal v'yatza liton toin echad shehu k'inyano yatza lahakav lo lahachmir. Anything that was included in a general statement but was then singled out to discuss a provision similar to the general category has been singled out to be more lenient rather than more severe. 10, kol davar shahaya bichlal v'yatza liton toin acher shlo k'inyano yatza lahakav lo lahachmir. Anything that was included in a general statement but was then singled out to discuss a provision not similar to the general category has been singled out both to be more lenient and more severe. 11, kol davar shahaya bichlal v'yatza lidon b'davar hechadash I ata yachol lahachziro l'klalo ad sheyachzirenu hakasuv l'klalo b'ferush. Anything that was included in a general statement but was then singled out to be treated as a new case cannot be returned to its general statement unless scripture returns it explicitly to its general statement. 12, davar halaman mi'inyano v'davar halaman misofo, a matter elucidated from its context or from the following passage. And then this last one is also probably one of our more familiar ones. Similarly, two passages that contradict one another until a third passage comes to reconcile them. Right. So these are Rabbi Shmuel's Middos, but then there were other sets of Middos as well. Yeah. Okay. That's good for context here. Okay. So then the Rambam says, we explain in the introduction to the Mishnah that the majority of the laws of Torah are learned out through one of these 13 Middos. And that a din learned out from one of these Middos sometimes has machlokes. But then there are other dinim that are explicit traditions received from Moshe that don't have machlokes. Ella shemevim alehem raya ba'achas mishloshes rei midos, but they're bringing a proof through one of the 13 midos. So Halbertal is going to deal with this in depth, but just two categories to keep in mind here. Sometimes the Yugabal midos are learned to derive things, and you have machlokes. Sometimes it is a tradition that was received that's unanimous, but the Yugabal midos are used to show like that it is to bring a raya for it. Okay. For example, I don't know if this is technically an example because it's not. Do I have an example? Maybe I don't even have an example.
I'm not quite sure if this counts, but like whenever they have a minalan where even though it's not a din from Moshe, it's sort of the same process, and that they're just trying to find something.
Right. So this is why I'm hesitant to say, because this gets us into the machlokas between the Rambam and the Ramban. yeah. I mean, in principle, you're right according to one of them. I just don't know according to who. Okay. So now here's where he says his reasoning for what it means to bring a proof from the 13 midos. And I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because someone always asks. Okay. Not even for YouTube, just whoever listens. The 13 midos of Hakadosh Baruch Hu is a different thing from the 13 midos of Torah Nidreshes plan. Okay, it just happens to be that there are 13, right? 13 midos of Hakadosh Baruch Hu is God's hashgacha on the world and has nothing to do with learning halachos. And then these 13 midos are in halachic derivations. What was it? And that's a different 13. 13 anima means is the Rambam's 13 ikarim that about what you need to get olam haba that someone wrote a poem about called animami.
13 years of learning.
That we know is different. Okay. All right. So then the Rambam goes on and explains. He says, "Lefi shemei chachmas hakasuv she'efshar limtzo bo remez hamore al oso haperush hamakubo o hekesh hamore alav," because from the wisdom of Scripture, okay, chachmas hakasuv, or the science of Scripture, it is possible to find an allusion with an A, which indicates that received explanation, o hekesh hamore alav, or a derivation or like inference that points to it. So here I can give an example, okay? And I know this is a good example because the Rambam himself uses this in the Parsha Mishnayos, I think. So the Torah says there are 4 minim that you take for on Sukkot, right? So it says priyat hadar kabos tamarim anaf eitz avos v'arve nachal. So two of those are explicit. Kapos tamari means palm fronds, and arve nachal means river bows, bow, right? Arve nachal, river willows. What am I saying? Okay. Then two of them, though, pri tadar, the fruit of a beautiful tree, and then anaf etavos means like plaited leaves. Those are just descriptions. Those are not actual identifiers. So there we only know it through Torah Shabbat Peh. So pri tadar we know means an esrog, right? So the Gemara goes through a bunch of saying, well, how do you know it's an esrog? Maybe it's a pepper, right? Maybe it's something else. And then the Gemara brings a bunch of like limudim and drushos to show that it's an esrog. So like it says, pri eitz hadar, don't read hadar beautiful, read hadar, which dwells. And it explains a fruit that dwells on its tree from year to year. Okay, or another one, it says, pri eitz hadar, pri shetam eto utam pirio shave, a tree that tastes the same as its bark, which I think Chaim Zifkin said that he tried, and esrog bark tastes like esrog. Okay, so we'll rely on his testimony. So the Rambam, so it looks, so an uneducated person would read that Gemara and think, oh, Chazal were debating about how to, about what type of fruit the Torah means when it says Priya Tadar. Okay, and they would say, well, it entertains the thought that it's peppers, right? So the Rambam points out, he says, no, that's not what's going on at all. We have a unanimous tradition going back to Moshe Rabbeinu. The Priya Tadar means esrog. No one ever disagreed with it. But the machlokes is in what derivation can you use from the psukim that alludes to the fact that this is an esrog. No one's actually debating it in real life. In contrast to other machlokim where you have machlokes on whether to derive something or how to derive something, and that's actually a machlokes. Like they actually disagree about what the halacha should be, and they're using the middos to try to prove their points. Okay, so the point is that it looks like they're deriving it in both cases, but in one case, it's a unanimous tradition, and they're just trying to figure out how it's reflected in the psukim. The other one, they're actually debating, and they're using the middos to prove it. Okay, and Halbertal is going to clarify all this. I want us to go into Halbertal, like getting as much as we can from the Rambam. Okay, clear? Okay, onward. Ukvar be'arnu, we've already explained iyun ze sham, this matter there, which we will go to if we need to. And since this is the case, so he says, because of this, you can't always say when you find Chazal learning something out from the 13 Middos that it was said to Moshe at Sinai, right? Some of the things you can say, but some of them you can't. V'gam lo nomar, or nemar, I don't know if it's nemar or nomar, b'chol ma shenimtzaim b'talmud somchin oso al achas mishlosh esrei midos shehu midorabanan. Nor can you say that any of the things that they attach using the 13 midos is derabanan. Okay, why? Lefi she'efshar shehu perush mekubal. It's possible that it was a received interpretation. Okay, so this is the difficulty here. Okay, is you cannot, the rule that the Rambam says, which the Ramban is also going to agree with, is you can't just point to these drushos and say you see that it's doraisa or you see that it's derabbanan. So the question is going to be, how do you know which drushos are deriving things from the psukim or reflecting a doraisa, and which ones are derabbanan? Yeah.
Was it this point that they will attach their bonds to drushas?
Yes.
What question is also, does it also mean that the thing was like what about the scenario where it was not told to Moshe, or as many scenarios as possible, like, and then in the later Chacham made a chiddush? Right.
So the same thing with the chiddush is that there are going to be chidushim that are part of the doraisa, and he's just bringing them out through the method of drushos, and then the other chidushim that are derabanan, and that he's attaching to the psukim as an asmachta, using the yigum middos. So the question is, how do you tell?
What I'm saying is, like, this is a person is machadish something in the derived, or like he's not being derived, he's just being machadish something.
So Halbertal is of the opinion that you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I know there's. I said this yesterday. I'm going to repeat it anyway. That this whole question of what the Rambam holds about the Yigum Middos is a matter of controversy. Yeah. Okay, so like we're just going with Halbertal for now, and then in our own minds. Okay, so he says like this. So here's what the Rambam states his method. Okay, and it's a very easy method. Okay, until you read the Ramban. Okay, v'derech v'kach. Okay, the method in this is simple. Shekol mash lo timsa enu meforish b'Torah. Anything which is not which you don't find explicitly in the Torah. V'timsa she'ha-Talmud lamad oso be'achas mishlosh esrei middos. And the Talmud, you find in the Talmud that it learns it out through one of the 13 middos. Im pirshu heim be'atmam ve'amru shezeh guf Torah o shezeh mita oraisa harizeh roilim noso. If you find them saying that it is of the body of Torah, like part of the corpus of Torah, or if you see them saying explicitly it's doraisa, then you know that you should count it in the Taryag. Shahari matike Torah Shebal Peh amru shu midoraisa, because the transmitters of Torah Shebal Peh said it's doraisa.
Oh, so he's saying that if they say it's doraisa, even if they're being mechanish it, maybe.
Yeah.
Then it's counted.
Exactly. Okay. V'im lo beruzos, but if they don't explain it, v'lo amruha b'ferush, and they don't say it explicitly, harihu midurabanan. Came she'in pasuk hamora alav, since there's no pasuk. So again, the litmus test is like this. Question A: is there a pasuk? Okay. If there is not a pasuk, question B is: do Chazal say that this drasha is about a halacha d'oraisa? If they say it is, then it is, and you count it. If they don't say it is, then you say it's d'Rabbanan. Okay, very simple. Okay, all right. For now, all right. V'gam zeh klal shekvar shaga bo zulasenu. Okay, and people other than us made a mistake about this. Okay, lefikach mana, and that's why they counted yiras chachamim bichlal mitzvos to say, which happens to be the mitzvah that we're doing, right? Well, kavod and mora of chachamim, right? So they included yiras chachamim in a mitzvah to say. Okay, uma shehiviu lekach. Why did they count this? Kafi hanira li, what seems to me is Ma'amar Rabbi Akiva es Hashem elokecha tira. So this is a famous story with Rabbi Akiva, where he had a theory about every S, like the word S, like Aleph Taf, is a ribui, right? Is including something. I think this is the story. I don't think I'm mixing up two stories. So the question is, what is the pasuk including when it says Es Hashem elokecha tira? Right? It could have just said Hashem elokecha tira. So why S? So that's l'rabos talmidei chachamim. That's including talmidei chachamim as a chiyuv. V'chashav, and this guy, the Bahag, thought shekolma shenilman beribui hu min aklalus hanizkaros, that anything that is learned out through a ribui is included, as we mentioned. So he counted it as a separate mitzvah from the fact that Rabbi Akiva learned it out from the word S. Yeah.
Does Rambam say anything the Gemara does not call deraisa is d'Rabbanan?
No, the Rambam is saying that if there's no pasuk and you have a drasha and the Chazal say about that halacha that is deraisa, then you count it as taryag.
But if they don't, then
it's d'Rabbanan. Yeah.
So
he's going to end up saying this is d'Rabbanan.
Okay.
Okay. You'll see what the Ramban does in a little while. I want to save it for Halbertal. V'ilu haya hadavar kamo shedimu. If this was as they imagined, madu lomanu kavod bal ha'im ve'eshes ha'av mitzvah bifnei asma nosefes al kibud avim. So background info here. Okay, there's a halacha that. So obviously you have to honor your father and you have to honor your mother, right? But you also have to honor your father's wife, even if she's not your mother, and you have to honor your mother's husband, even if he's not your father. And why? Because it's an extension of kibud avim, right? So when your father remarries, then or if he has multiple wives, back when that was the thing, right? Then you have to honor your father's wife, not because she deserves it, but because he deserves it, and she's an extension of him. Okay, so Rambam saying, why don't these people count that as a mitzvah? Because that apparently was learned out through a ribui or through a drasha. V'chein kavod achiv hagadol. Okay, so same thing. When it says there's a drasha in Chazal that says kabed es avicha the es imecha, and there's a drasha that says es includes your older brother. Okay, that you have to honor your older brother. All right, ki ha'anashim hele, these people lamdu chiyuv hakavod. Lahem b'riboy. They learn out from the riboy. Amar, he says the thing I was saying. Amru es avicha l'rabos achicha hagadol u'l'rabos ba'al imacha. It says es avicha comes to include your older brother and to include the husband of your mother. The es imecha l'rabos eshes avicha, and your es imecha is coming to include the wife of your father. Kamosh amru es Hashem elokecha tira l'rabos talmidei chachamim. Just like es Hashem elokecha tira comes to include talmidei chachamim. Umadu manu elu v'lo manu elu. Why did they count talmidei chachamim as one of taryag and not these? So again, his accusation of the Bahag, like it was in the last one, he's not saying that the principle itself well, in the last one he was saying it was ridiculous, but here he's not saying it's ridiculous. He's saying if this rule were true, why wouldn't you do it across the board? Okay, were you asking something, Mati?
I guess it was just that would be like a stepmom.
Stepmom, yeah, correct. Okay, right. So he's saying, so here he hasn't called it ridiculous, but he's saying like it's inconsistent, and therefore it can't be a rule. Okay, their ignorance has brought them to a greater error than this. If these people find a drush on any pasuk, and again here drush is a halachic drush, and that drush obligates you to do certain actions, specific actions, or to distance yourself from certain actions, and without a doubt these are derabanan, they count them among the mitzvos. Okay, this is like getting both problems, the first shorsh and the second shorsh. Let's see if he gives examples. Oh, I know the example he's going to give. Even though the pshat of the pasuk does not indicate the thing that they does not indicate these things. Al af haklal shalimdunu also al shalom who aram ein mikra yudei pshuta, because we have a general principle that Chazal told us, which says that the pasuk doesn't leave its pshat. You can't take the pasuk out of its pshat. Throughout the entire Talmud, the Talmud's always asking, what is the pasuk itself talking about? As we find one pasuk that will teach many things by way of elucidation and limud. Okay. I think he's going to give an example. If not, I'll give one. And included in their reliance on this error, that also led them to count visiting the sick, comforting mourners, and burying the dead included in mitzvah say. Because there's a drasha apparently that takes this pasuk that God says that you shall make known to them the way that they should go in and the action that they should do. Amram and Chazal say, Es haderech zog milos chasadim yelchu ze bikur cholim ba ze kviras mesim v'esamase elu hadinim asher yasun zolifnim mishur sadin. So Chazal have a drasha where they take each part of that pasuk and they learn out this refers to bikur cholim, this refers to nikum avelim, etc. V'chashu, and these guys thought shekol peula upeula mina peula salalu mitzvah b'fnei atzma, that each and every one of these actions is its own mitzvah. V'lo yadu shekol peula salalu v'domein nichlalos bichlal mitzvah say bichlal hamitzvos hamoros b'torah b'ferush v'hu amro yisala v'haftal l'recha kamocha. These guys didn't know that all of these actions are included under one explicit mitzvah in the Torah, which is v'haftal l'recha kamocha. Not that they should be counted as separate mitzvos. U'v'derech zeh atmo manu chishuv tkufos mitzvah bichlal hadrash shizkiru al amro kihi chachmaschem uvinaschem le'enei ha'amim. They also counted doing the calculations for the Kiddush HaChodesh as its own mitzvah, based on the drush that says in Devarim, kihi chachmaschem uvinaschem le'enei ha'amim. It will be your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the people. V'hu amram, and Chazal said, ezehu chachma ubinashi le'enei ha'amim. What is the chachma that we have that is in the eyes of the nations? That's astronomy. Yeah.
I guess the were trying to like, I don't know how wrong I was like passing your children through the fire of Moshe. Wouldn't that already be fall under Vodazara?
That's a good question. I think this is just me thinking. Okay, that I don't know that the Rambam says this. I think because there is a separate azhara for molech and a separate punishment for molech, then it is not automatically included in Avodah Zarah. Plus, it's not actually Avodah Zarah according to the Rambam. It was a different procedure, I think. Molech is passing the kids through the fire. This very, very common type of idolatrous practice that they did back then. Yeah. Johnny went to a child cemetery in what was Carthage? What's Carthage now? I'm blanking. Tunisia. Yeah, in Tunisia, where he saw like graves of hundreds of thousands of kids that were offered to Afro Molech. Yeah. Machlok is whether you actually kill the kid or not, but yeah. What?
It was a pun.
I missed it.
Kinder.
Okay. You never said it was a good pun. All right. if we were to count something that is clearer than this, and that and is possible to entertain the thought that is proper to count. So in other words, if you were to apply this across the board, then you would have thousands of mitzvos, and that is saying it's absurd. Okay, is that the end, or is there more? Nope. Okay, more. V'shema taksho, maybe you'll think, maybe you think that we refrain from counting these because they're not clear. Or because the law that's learned out from the midah, maybe it's proper, maybe it's not proper. That's not the reason. Here, I'll pause it. Okay, yeah, so that's not the reason. In other words, maybe you'll say that the only reason we don't count it is because there's it's disputed. Okay, so he's saying no, but that's not the reason. Oh, this is foreshadowing, even though you don't know it. Okay, the Halbertal takes this as a fundamental in the Rambam's whole system. Okay, so he says that the reason is because whatever is learned out is the branches from the roots. Okay, keep that analogy in mind. Shenemru lo l'Moshe b'Sinai b'Firish, which were said to Moshe at Sinai explicitly. V'hem sheish me'os u'shlosh esrei mitzvos, and they are the 613 mitzvos. V'afilu haya halom in Moshe ba'atzmo hari elu inam nimnim. Even if Moshe himself were to learn this out to give a drasha, it would still not be counted. Okay, in other words, it's not a matter of certainty, and it's not that we don't count them because we're not certain. Even if Moshe came and said, "Hey guys, here's a drasha, I'm telling you for sure that this is the halacha," we would still say, Moshe, that's midurabanan. Okay, why? Because if Moshe didn't say explicitly that it was doraisa, if he just learned out from a drasha and didn't clarify, then we would say that it's not doraisa. The proof for this is what is stated in the Gemara Tumura. Elef ushvameos kulin v'chumurin v'gzera shavas v'dikduke sofrim nishtakachu b'mei evelo shamosha. Yeah.
They're not there. Where are they not counted?
They are not counted. Yeah, sorry, they're not counted.
The Josh aren't counted as derived.
Well, it would be either a drush that is elucidating a deoraisa halacha, or it would be a derabanan that's being attached to the psukim, but it wouldn't be counted as its own separate deoraisa. Yeah, thanks for correcting me. That's important. Okay, so he says the proof of this is the Gemara Tumura says that 1,700 kulas and chumras and gzer shavos and dikduke sofrim were forgotten during the avelos of Moshe. Okay, it was a sad time. Okay, and they forgot all these halachos. Ve'alfa pichein, and nevertheless, hechziran Osniel ben Knaz mi pilpulo. Osniel ben Knaz, who was a great chacham, restored them through his analysis. Okay, Shenemar, as it says, Vayomer Kalev Asher Yake es Kiryat Sefer V'lakda v'hule V'yalakda Osniel ben Knaz. Okay, so there's a pasuk in, I'm guessing that's Yoshua 17. Yep, Sefer Yoshua. Okay, so there is a pasuk that is, I lost my place. That alludes to the fact that that Osniel restored them. Okay, that it says he captured it, right? And so that the drush is that he like recaptured the halachos. V'imelu hein hanishkachos, and if these are the ones that were forgotten, kama haisa haklalos shemimena nishkach misparzeh. Kama haisa haklalos shemimena nishkach misparzeh. Shari lo yitachin lo nishkach kol ma shenilmad. It's not possible that he forgot everything that is learned. I don't know how to translate that, so I'm gonna have to cheat and look at the English.
Is he saying the rules? Well, as like anything. Is like you're counting things. Is it like Mahal? You're counting things that could have been in what that could have been in what was forgotten and rediscovered.
So I see that reading. I don't think that is the correct reading, and I think Sefaria has it. I don't know whose translation. Oh, this is I don't know who this person is. Oh, this is a new translation. Nice, translated by Rabbi Francis Nataf. Thank you, Mr. Nataf, Rabbi Nataf. It says, and if this was what was forgotten, what was the total from which this was forgotten? For it would certainly be false to say that everything that was known was forgotten. So without a doubt, those laws that were drawn out by Kal V'chomer and other principles were many thousands, and they were well known at the time of Moshe. Okay, well, what's this argument here? Let me read this again in the Hebrew.
They're saying is that you're arguing a number of things. What you count as a law would includes all these things, like say, like call Homer, call Joshua.
Yeah.
And we know from this that time of Moshe are like thousands of
okay,
them.
right.
So therefore, it can't be that your methods are what we include, because then you get like several thousand. It can't just be we're still the stuff that comes post Moshe, because we know even if you include only the stuff that comes like while Moshe was alive, you'd still have over 613.
Is he still going off of that argument that it's going to be that you have more than 613, or is he making another argument? I'm not convinced that it's part of the same argument. Let me read it in Kafka's translation now. The im elu heinan nishkachos. If those are the ones that were forgotten, meaning the 1,700, kama haisah klalus shemimena nishkach mispar zeh. What was the total from which this number was forgotten? You can't say that this number that was forgotten was everything that was learned. If so, there's no doubt that those laws that were learned from the Kal V'chomer and others from the Middos were in the myriad thousands. And these were already learned out in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu and were forgotten. I think I know what he's saying. He's saying like this. It's clear that these things that were learned out in the time of Moshe were not part of the. I just lost it.
This thing is, you might have a Havmiyah say that like some of the things that some drashos from the time of Moshe, some weren't. And it's only drashos from the time of Moshe, probably 613 minutes saying no, we know there are like over 1,000 drashos at the time of Moshe. So therefore, which is more 613, so which means that if you were told all the drashos from the time of Moshe, you get over 613. So you can't just say the only drashos we're counting are the ones from the time of Moshe.
I thought he was making a different argument. I hear that. That's possible. I thought he was making an argument that because before he started saying even if Moshe gave the drush, we wouldn't count it. So I think what he's trying to say is that there were tons and tons and tons of drushos at the time of Moshe, and even more so than the number. Well, certainly more so than the number that were forgotten. And if you're going to count all of those, maybe we're saying the same thing. If you're going to count all of those as being countable, like in Taryag, then you got too many. Maybe we are saying the same thing.
I guess that's also an additional point. Is that maybe I was making this of like to counter a Havmiyah say it's only the ones from Moshe we count.
Right.
As in like maybe counting Havmiyah. Like,
right, but is he saying that these were all from Moshe Rabbeinu, all the drashos?
Well, he's certainly saying over 1,000.
Right. Yeah. I'm not quite sure. Let's just go on and see if this clarifies a little bit more. All of these were learned out during the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Right. So these were all learned from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So in other words, who cares whether Moshe did the drasha? What matters is they were able to ask Moshe, are these good drashos? And so yeah. You see from here that even during the days of Moshe, we talk about the inferences of the Sofrim. Everything that was not heard explicitly at Sinai is midivrei Sofrim. Okay, maybe he is saying, like I was saying earlier, before you corrected me, that all of it is midivrei Sofrim. See, this is the hard part, right? Because divrei Sofrim is also different than dirabanan. Like Rambam does not use those terms interchangeably. So you see from here that it's clear that the 613 mitzvos that were said to Moshe at Sinai, we don't count everything that was learned out from the Middos, even during the time of Moshe. All the more so the ones that were learned after Moshe. Yeah, so I think that's his main thing. He's trying to say that the original Al-Tak show was saying, don't think that the only reason we don't count these is because we're not certain of their legitimacy. Because even if Moshe verified about their legitimacy, they would still be considered midivrei Sofrim unless it was said explicitly that they were from Sinai. Ella ein limnos ki im ma shahayu pirish makubal mimenu. We only count what is a received explanation from him. And this is that the people who passed it down in Shorsh say explicitly that they say that this thing is usher to do and it's isur d'oraisa, or they say this is part of the body of Torah. Then we'll count it. Because we know it through tradition, not through one of the Middos. And the only reason that they are using the Yigdal Middos about these unanimous traditions is to show us the chachma of the scripture. Like we learned in the Perishah Mishnah, which I have here, but we're not going to read it right now because I want to go to Halbertal today. Okay. So let's go to Halbertal, okay, and see what he says. And this is going to also take us back into the Ramban. So we are on page 116 at the bottom. Revelation and interpretation. And this is going to overlap with part of what we just read, but we'll read it in context anyway. The second principle in Maimonides' introduction to the Book of Commandments defines what was given at Sinai. In it, Maimonides states, quote, not everything derived using the 13 hermeneutic principles for interpreting the Torah, or by extension, that's riboy, is worthy of being enumerated, end quote. This continues the goals of the first rule, namely isolating the status of Moses' revelation vis-a-vis the rest of the halachic corpus as exclusive, stable, as its exclusive, stable, and immutable core. However, the claims he makes in the second rule go much further, both in terms of its intellectual boldness and in terms of its relationship with Talmudic literature. Okay, exciting. By means of this principle, Maimonides attempts to distance not only prophecies and rabbinic enactments from the revelation to Moshe, like we saw yesterday, but also the Torah as it is from the rabbinic interpretation thereof. Maimonides stated that what is derived using the 13 hermeneutic principles of the oral Torah is not worthy of being enumerated. In his opinion, laws that the sages derived using these methods of interpretation do not have the status of a commandment stated to Moshe at Sinai and are not included in his count of the commandments. Such laws are considered rabbinic commandments, even though they are derived through the interpretation of biblical verses. The status of deoraisa is accorded only to interpretations transmitted by Moshe, not to laws produced by the sages.
So there's two ways to have a mitzvah deoraisa. Is like one is if it's in the Torah, and if it's directly from Moshe.
No. Well, okay. Yes, plus. One is if there's an open pasuk about it. The other is if there's no open pasuk, but they get it through the drashos and it's identified as being passed down from Moshe as deoraisa. So if there's no pasuk and it's a drasha, but they don't explicitly say this is deoraisa, then it's derived according to the Rambam. Yeah. Okay. According to Maimonides, the distinction between interpretations given to Moshe and those that the sages created through their intellectual endeavors rests upon the testimony of the sages themselves. Where the sages state explicitly that their interpretation is, quote, of the corpus of Torah, end quote, or deoraisa, it indicates that they received it as a tradition from Moses. And where they did not explicitly attest to this, the resulting law has rabbinical status. Quote from the Rambam, since this is the case, it cannot be said of everything that the sages derived using one of the 13 hermeneutical principles that it was said to Moses at Sinai. Yet, it also cannot be said that everything found in the Talmud that is based on one of the 13 principles is rabbinic, for it is possible that it represents a received interpretation. The way to distinguish is thus. Anything that is not made explicit in the Torah, but which is derived in the Talmud from one of the 13 principles, if the sages explicitly stated that this is part of the corpus of Torah or that it is deoraisa, then it is worthy of being enumerated, for the bearers of the tradition have said it is deoraisa. If they have not explained or stated thus explicitly, then it is rabbinic. End quote.
Isn't that presupposing the Gemara is going to have every single one of those mitzvahs?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it is presupposing that.
I just have a hard time seeing it because if there's a derived mitzvah of Mishkan construction.
No, Mishkan construction is in the Psukim.
I can know that, but it's well, like say it's not. Like, is it clear and obvious how many ways you can divide this?
It's a good question. I mean, the Rambam counts it as one, right? Also, Mikdash, and that's it. That's the only
one. Counts as one.
Yeah.
The entire Mishkan church, all of it's just one mitzvah.
One mitzvah, yeah.
No separate mitzvahs for each individual.
Nope. I wonder if other Mefarshim do that. I don't know. Yeah.
That seems very not Shoresh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know an easy way to find it. I'll have to. I want to see if I can find it later on. But yeah, okay. But yeah, you're right though. Is that according to the Rambam, anything which is learned out through the Middos, would have to be identified explicitly as doraisa for it to be counted.
Okay.
And all of them would have to be there. Okay, and we'll see the Ramban is going to differ in a second. I think we're going to get to the Ramban today. Aside from the difference, back to Halbertal, aside from the difference between these two types of halacha, those received by tradition and those created by interpretation, in terms of legal status, Maimonides introduces another distinction between them, the distinction we discussed earlier that he raised in his introduction to the commentary on the Mishnah. Legal interpretations received from Sinai are not subject to controversy. Okay, so this is a big controversy. Okay, the Rambam holds this rule, which I'm going to read from the Mishnah Torah, because I don't know offhand where to find it in the Pirush Mishnayos. So this is in Halachos Mamrim. Let me see where it is. Aleph Gimel. Okay. So the Ram says like this, and we brought this up earlier this year, I think, but we're going to read it again. Divrei HaKabbalah, matters that were received by tradition, ein behen machlokas l'olam, are never subject to machlokas. Okay. V'chol davar shetimsa bo machlokas. Anytime you find a machlokas, biyadua she'eno kabbalah mi Moshe Rabbeinu. You know that it is not received from Moshe. Okay. Udvarim shalomdim min hadin. Im hiskimu alehen based in hagadol kulam hari hiskimu. Im nachluku behen holotin achar arov umutzin hadin achal rabim. I find that that's not related to our thing. In fact, I actually am going to get the Rambam's other statement of this. I do want to
it's really a table of law where the very fact there's a machlokas about sort of disproves the opinion.
Yeah.
Right. And then, once you say there's no machlokas about Islam, they get 100%. The second machlokas or they cast down.
Right. Yep. I'm with you there. Okay. So if you look in the beginning of the book on page. Oh, wait a minute. Did I actually include this in the packet? That'd be really nice of me if I did that. If it's on Yud Aleph,
I see Yud Aleph.
So it is here. Yay for me. Okay, so let's read it in. I mean, you could use the hard book if you want, but okay. So the Rambam is going to say here at the very top of the right column. This is Hakdama to Pirush Mishnayos. Third line. There are 5 categories of laws of the Torah. Okay. So the first is received explanations from Moshe Rabbeinu that are alluded to in the pasuk, or that it is possible to derive from one of the Middos. And these have no machlokas on them at all. Anytime someone says, I received it, that puts to rest any machlokas. Okay, so this would be, for example, like anyone in, I guess, up through the Amoraim. Yeah. So this would be the example that I gave of, Priyat Hadar, right, is we have a tradition that is esrog, ayin tachas ayin. We have a tradition, undisputed tradition that's money, not literal eyes, right? So all those things are, we have a tradition that where it says, 40 whiplashes, it really means 39. Okay, so that's category 1. The second one is Haim Hadinim Shebehem Amru Shem Halacha Lemoshe Misinai, Ve'ena Lehem Raya K'moshe Amarnu, V'gam Zeh Mimashem Bo Machlokas. Okay, so this is a topic that he addressed at length. This is what we call Halacha Lemoshe Misinai. Now, a lot of halachos are to Moshe from Sinai, but the only things we call halachos Lemoshe Misinai are halachos that were received by tradition that don't have any allusion in the psukim. Okay, for example, the fact that tefillin are square, the fact that tefillin have to be black, the fact that nisu hamayim on Sukkot, the fact that you do the water libations. So all of those, we have a tradition going back that it's from Moshe, but there's no allusion whatsoever in the psukim. Okay, the shiurim, right? All the shiurim of the Torah of like kazayis and kibetza and all that stuff is halachos Moshe Sinai. Nowhere in the Torah does it allude to what the shiur is. Okay, so that's category 2. The third category, hemadinim shenilmadu ba'achas hamidos ubahem no felas machlokas k'moshe amarnu. The laws that are derived from the 13 Middos where there is machlokas. V'nifsak b'hem hadin kadas harov, and the din is paskin according to the majority. According to the principles we stated earlier. B'amei devar memurim k'shadavar shakol. When is this talking about? That's when the matter is equal, when it's equal machlokas. That's when we say if it's a halacha that's received, we'll accept it. But if it is a derivation, then we have an argument. So this is the statement. This is why I want to read this, that machlokas and arguments only apply to that which was not received by tradition. The timsaim b'chol talmud chokrim al darchei hadin shebiglalam nafla machlokas bein halukim v'omrim b'mai kamiflagi or my time of derivi ploni or my beinayu. So he says you'll find all over the Talmud them arguing about halachos like this, where they'll say, what are they arguing about? What's the reasoning of so and so? What is the difference between them? Some go like this in this way. And they'll give different reasons. Aval, okay, now this is where he states emphatically. If you think that even the halachos that are subject to machlokas that is received from Moshe, okay, if you thought that you could have a machlokas on something received from Moshe, and that machlokas came about through an error in the transmission or through forgetting, and one of them is correct in saying that this is my tradition, and the other one is erroneous. Or if you think that one of Chazal forgot, or one of them didn't listen to his Rebbe enough, or maybe and if you bring a proof to your theory from the fact that it says once the Talmidim of Shammai and Hillel became numerous and these Talmidim did not serve their masters properly, then the Torah then machlokas perpetuated in Israel, and the Torah became like two Torahs. That theory is disgusting and bizarre. Okay, why? He says v'hu davar bilti nachon, and it's not true. V'lo matim l'klalim, and it's not in line with principles. V'choshed banashim shemihim kibalnu es haTorah, and you're casting aspersions. You're being suspicious of the men from whom we received the Torah. V'chosed bata, all of this is null and void. Well, that's the question, isn't it? Right? So just a quick answer for that, even though the Rambam is going to say it himself, he's going to say machlokas only comes about when you are applying the existing halacha to new cases, or you're deriving new halachos, or something like that. It's going to come about in derivations, not in received traditions.
So, like through thoughts of logic.
Yeah, and Halbertal is going to give a brilliant example. Yeah.
Does anybody have a counterexample? Because I think because even if the Rambam tries to bring a teres, I think a single counterexample just disproves this entirely.
Yeah. So there is. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Rabbi Chait used to give a massive shavuos shiur on every shavuos, and it seems that the consensus that the best. Oh, and then he would record it after shavuos. Like he would go through it again over the course of like a week or two or three. The consensus from what I've heard is that the best shavuos shiur was the shavuos shiur of 1993. Okay, called the Masorah shiur, and he tackles that question. Like the question of how machlokas comes about, and what do you do with all the cases where there are seemingly exceptions to this rule.
Because if anyone claims something is an exception, that means that they have a different tradition, whether it's from Moshe than the Rambam,
right? Which
immediately disproves the Rambam's point, because it doesn't matter if the Rambam has a teretz, because that person's proved that somewhere along the line, one of the two got the tradition wrong.
Right, but that's why you have to listen to the shavuos shiur. Okay, because Rabbi Shea talks about that. Okay, maybe what
is it on the website?
It's a good question if it's on the website. If it is, I know where it would be. If not, then I could send it to you. YBT audio, not young black teenagers. I always love how that comes up. Fundamentals, is it under fundamentals? Yep, in 3 parts. It's on the fundamentals on the old website. HL 145 through 147,
1993.
The 1993 shavuos shiur. It's what?
That's great.
Yep, that was before my time. I was just a little non-Jewish kid at the time. Okay. So Ram says, if you think, so just to repeat, just to rev us back into this, if you were to say that a machlokas could be on anything that was passed down from Moshe, and that it came about through either forgetting or through not listening to your Rebbe enough or through making a mistake, and that any machlokas, one of them is right and one of them is wrong. So then he says, it's disgusting, it's wrong, it's bizarre, get it out of the base Midrash, okay? And you're suspecting innocent people, kosher people, okay? And that's bad. And then he accuses this guy even more. What would lead someone to such a bad outlook? Mute yedias divrei chachamim haniftzayim b'Talmud, lack of familiarity with the Talmud. Okay, lefi shematzanu she'apirish mekubal mimoshe v'zeh nachon lefi haklal she'damnu, because they will find that the explanation that was received from Moshe, they'll find the explanation received from Moshe, and this is good according to the principles that we've outlined. So these people don't differentiate between the principles that were received and the chidushim that were learned out through the darkei iyun, which is what we're talking about now, is like learning out through the Middos. We're going to have to interrupt midstream, but let's just read one more paragraph. If you're in doubt about anything, don't be in doubt about this machlokes beis Hillel and beis Shammai. But when they say machabdim es habayis v'achkach notlim liyadayim or notlim liyadayim v'achkach machabdim es habayis, I don't remember the context, but this machlokes of do you sweep the house and then wash your hands, or wash your hands and then sweep the house? I don't remember the context here. Okay, she'ein achas mishtei asvaros mekubalos mimoshe. Neither of these two opinions were received from Moshe. V'lo shama miSinai, and they were not heard from Sinai. Okay, v'sibas machlokasam k'moshe amru. The cause of the machlokas is what we said. She'echad mehem oser lehishtamish b'am haaretz v'asheni matir, is because of a prior machlokas about one of them forbids you to utilize an amharetz, and the second one is matir. I don't know the particulars here, and we don't have time to look it up today. And all of these other machlokas, which are branches of branches of branches. Aval Amram Mishirabu Talmidei Shammai v'Hillel lo shimshu kol tzarachan Rab sa machlokas b'Yisrael. What about that statement in the Gemara that once the students of Shammai and Hillel increased and they didn't serve their masters properly, then machlokas increased? Inyan deverzeh bar mode. So the explanation of this is very clear, and this is a very important sentence in the Hakdama to Pirush Mishnayos. Kishnei anashim, two men or women, shehem shavim b'havana, who are equal in understanding, iyun, in their analytical abilities, yedias haklalim shelemedim mehem, and equal in their knowledge of the general principles that we learn from. Lo tihye b'neim machlokas b'meh shalomdim ba'achas hamidos b'shum paim. There will not be any machlokas between them at all in when they learn out through the Middos. And if there is a machlokas, tiyeh mu'etes, it's going to be a minor machlokas. Kamo shalom atzanu machlokas bein Shammai v'Hillel ela b'halachos achados. Just like you only find a few halachos where Hillel and Shammai argue. Right, so this is the big thing. Hillel and Shammai only have a handful of actual machlokas in. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai have dozens of machlokas. Okay, why? Because the way Hillel and Shammai learned things was very close to one another. And each one was equally knowledgeable about the general principles. But when the learning level of their students diminished, the nechleshu etzlam darchei hadin, and the methodologies of derivation were weakened in their students, b'hashva'a l'Shammai v'Hillel, in comparison to Shammai and Hillel Rabboseim, their rabbis, nafla machlokas beinehem b'shas hamasa umatan b'harbe inyanim. Then there became a lot of machlokas in many areas. Lefi shekol echad mehen dan lefi koach sichlo, because each one was applying the principles and derivations according to his own intellect. Lufi haklalim hayduim lo, and according to the general principles that were known to him. The ain and lahashima b'kach, and you can't fault them for that. Kilo nuchal anachnu lahachriach shnei bnei adam hamizvakachim sheyizvakachu lefi ramas sichlam shel Yehoshua Pinchas. We can't expect all people who argue to argue on the level of the intellects of Yehoshua and Pinchas. V'gam ein anachnu rishayim lefakfek b'mesh nechlaku bo mipnei she'enam kishamai v'hillel or l'mala mehem, and we certainly can't fault them for not being on the level to argue like Hillel and Shammai or people above them. God doesn't require this of us. God obligates us to listen to whatever chachamim are in our generation. As it says, you should go to the judge in your days, but and you shall inquire. This is how machlokas came about. Not that one of them made a mistake in the tradition, and the tradition of one is true and the other one's false. How clear are these things to one who understands them or who listens to the shvuah here? And how great are these matters in Torah, this principle in Torah? So just to summarize, then we have to stop for today. He's saying, so what we get out of this Rambam is three things, I think. If it's a Kabbalah Moshe, no machlokas at all. Okay, machlokas only applies on things that they were learning out through dinim, like through the derivations and through applications of the iyun Middos. And those things are not from Moshe. And if you have two chachamim who are equal in their intellect and equal in their knowledge, they will have very, very few machlokim. And all machlokas came about when people stopped, when the qualities of their intellect were not as high and the knowledge of the general principles was not as firm. That's when you get a lot of machlokas. And that's why you have tons of machlokas in the post-Talmud era, among Gaonim, Rishonim, and Achronim, but, while we have the sitter here, I mean, this is one of the things I've heard is the reason why there's a minhag to say the Mishnayos of Ezehu Makoman, right? With which Masechta is that from? From Zvachim Perek Chamishi, because there's no machlokas. So at that time, then there just was not machlokas on any of these things. Only later on did machlokas develop from these limudim. Okay, but we got to stop for today. And tomorrow, I really, really hope we get to the Ramban. Yeah, I mean, let me just see, just to look ahead. Where was in the Ramban?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Oh, we will get to the Ramban tomorrow, assuming that we have shiras planned. Yeah.
So I was a bit confused when you said that when you have two people that say they have a Masorah, but they contradict each other. Does that mean they actually don't have a Masorah, or they really do?
So the Rambam is going to say that there is no such case.
There is no such case.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about Chazal, right? We're not talking about post Talmud, right? So the Rambam is going to say that anytime anyone in Chazal says like this is a Kabbalah, like this is a received tradition, no one's going to argue on it. Yeah. Okay, stop here for today. This is making me want to go back and listen to the shvuah here. I haven't listened to it in a long time, and I don't think I finished the third part, but maybe we should do that.
Yeah,
How do you sit just and listen to it?
I don't just sit. It's impossible. When I was in yeshiva, whenever I did a shvuah shir, I would take notes on it. Or if I'm doing it, I can listen to a hashkafa shir while I'm doing other stuff. And halachos shir, I can't always do it if my attention is divided.
So how do you